When your brain gets linked to all that dopamine from a specific avatar of a person that you've been watching or consuming, it's literal consumption in pornography proper, OnlyFans, or even on social media, your brain gets linked to dopamine from that person, not your partner. It gets linked to those acts, those scenarios. So now your brain needs and wants that. It desires that. So sexual desire for your partner goes down.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Eyes Wide Open. Our guest today is Dr. Trish Leigh, and Dr. Trish is a world-renowned cognitive neuroscientist, a certified brain health, neurofeedback, and sex addiction recovery coach. She's also a pioneer and thought leader and speaker on the topics relating to personal transformation through improved brain performance. And she's the best-selling author of a new book that came out a few months ago called Mind Over Explicit Matter, Quit Porn and Improve Intimacy Through Neuroscience. I'm so glad you're here today. I know we've been trying to do this for a little while, so thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. And it's totally a mouthful. That's why I would just tell people that I'm a cognitive neuroscientist and we let the rest of it fall out because it's quite the mouthful for sure. But yeah, I'm glad to be here. Let's dive in.
Yeah, it is. So before we get started on all things neuroscience, porn, masturbation, all the things that I can't believe my dad's going to probably listen to this episode. Oh, no. Am I? Oh, no. Make sure I have stable.
Yeah,
Am I back?
You're a little glitchy. I don't know if you're back.
Are you able to hear me? Okay. Sometimes it does glitch.
Now, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Sometimes Riverside does glitch, so I usually just pause for a minute and it'll come back.
Just
cool.
Yeah, totally. And I can try to fill in the gaps if I can hear enough.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about all of these things: sex, addiction, porn, masturbation, all sorts of mental health challenges that can come and the neuroscience behind them. So before we do that, I would love to ask you my favorite question to ask a guest, which is, what did you want to be when you were a young child, and how did that change to lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, because I haven't thought about that in quite a while, but when I was young, I wanted to be president of the United States, which is so funny because I am not a political person at all. So like in thinking about the appeal to, president of the United States is likely I'm in a role close to what I envisioned. Obviously, I'm not running a country, but my goal was to help people self-actualize and become the version of themselves. And I think my young mind thought being the president was the way that I could do that, help as many people as possible. So I think that morphed. When I was young, I was trying to make the distinction to, follow a career in healthcare or law. But because I saw the differential diagnosis and the thinking about people's situations and being able to help people, but obviously law is like politics where it's very contentious, and that I don't love. So I think it led me in the direction that now I'm in, where I feel really good about being able to help people from the inside out.
Yeah, literally from the inside out. What's interesting about the lawyer thing and the presidential thing to an extent, even though the presidential thing you had maybe a different approach, but the debating element, which you've been doing a little bit of, you were saying before we started recording now.
Definitely. And I see that as a challenge now because I really try to stay in peace. And I say it all the time. At this point in my life, my number one goal is peace. It really is. Like, I have 5 young adult children. I've been married for 23 years. I've had a whole lot of challenges that have led me to making my largest goal just be peaceful. So why would I put myself in a position of debate? And I see it as an extension of being able to stay in a place of peace while we talk about things that are challenging. Like, literally, it's emotional regulation, which stems from self-regulation, which stems from neurological regulation. So it's kind of like, practicing what I preach.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think the thing with debates too is, like, we live in a time now where, partially because of the internet, I think, but people sit in echo chambers and debates kind of become like personal attacks in a lot of cases. And I'm like, let's talk about the merits of an idea and debate that, not talk about the people behind them, because, we're so polarized. Yeah.
And those are discussions. That's why I see, like, let's discuss this stuff and have an open mind, not be in a position of attack. And, when that's on the table, I'm all for it because everybody grows. But if you have a quote unquote opponent, I was supposed to do a debate this past Saturday with an OnlyFans performer who backed out at the last minute, and they called her my opponent. And I thought, I don't know about that. Like, let's
Mm,
just have a discussion. We don't have to be opponents. We can have varying perspectives, but let's, think about it from different vantage points. And then, of course, I always try to bring the science. So, that's important to me.
yeah. Of course. I mean, that's the basis of everything. And I think that that's actually a really good segue into what you've been really working on lately. And I found you on social media several months ago. And I found it fascinating because we're kind of in this place now as a society where we've kind of opened up our bedrooms, for lack of a better word, a little bit more. Like, so many stigmas around, what you do and don't do in your relationship and your marriages, all of that stuff, or by yourself and your personal experiences. But it became a little like more normalized to be like, oh yeah, let's talk about it publicly, or let's have an open, you got sex therapists, all this stuff now. And like everything, sometimes things go a little too far. But what's interesting to me is we kind of normalized things like, porn and masturbation and made them less of a stigma. Fans has really like democratized porn. And if you have any thoughts on that, you can throw those in too. But I'm curious to get
A
your
lot.
take
I have a
on.
lot.
Yeah, I'll just sit back and put my feet up. But what's interesting to me is now it's
Uh-huh.
like, okay, we normalized these things. Porn isn't this horrible thing that it used to be. It's available on every device. And then at the same time, there's like, oh, it's actually healthy to masturbate. It's healthy to do this and that. And then it's like, well, what's healthy and what's not? And what's the science behind what it does to your brain and your mental health? So
Hmm.
that's a lot there.
Yeah,
But like, how do you feel about the
that's a
kind
lot.
of state
And
of,
let's
yeah.
absolutely, let's parse it all out because there's a lot there that could benefit from some parsing. And actually, I like some of the language, or I think the language that you use will help us. So, first of all, it's like I try not to consider things horrible or wonderful when we're talking about the discussion. So, like, I would never characterize porn as horrible. I would characterize it as very unhealthy. And I have been quoted saying that it damages your brain and destroys your brain. And I've been accused of hyperbole, but that comes from all the brains that I've seen in my work. I can visualize brain performance patterns. I've seen there's two primary patterns that are associated with porn addiction and compulsive masturbation, to get to the next piece in a second. But there's two brain patterns. They are very damaged, very high levels of brain dysfunction. I've seen it thousands of times. So to me, that's where there's no debate. When something's scientifically true, we can discuss it and you can have a different viewpoint of it. But this is epidemic levels. People are now experiencing this brain dysregulation, which equals lack of self regulation. You have to go back to porn and masturbation for dopamine. It actually has nothing to do with sex. But as you know, sex sells, it always has. So now, this opening up of talking about porn and masturbation is normalized. That's part of that. And of course, like, we can see it as there's kind of two roads, which I just told you I wouldn't characterize them as good or bad, but it is opening the conversation. Sex sells in one place. And now we're talking about it from a mental health standpoint too, which I think is all beautiful. Going back to the two roads, with TV shows or streaming shows all being even more sexualized than they were in the past. The whole movies, the 50 Shades, like that's where
Hmm.
all of that became not only normalized, but celebrated, so this is the one avenue. And then the other avenue is now people are talking about it openly, like it's no big deal. And just to visit the, excuse me, the masturbation piece for a minute, is there is a distinction between compulsive masturbation and non. Non is you've basically never watched porn, you've never had a consistent masturbation habit, it's never been associated with fantasy, high levels of dopamine. Dopamine is the neurochemical of motivation, more, and pleasure. It basically keeps you going back for more. So if you've never been in a position where that's a thing for you, then yeah, maybe we could say masturbation is quote unquote healthy. But if any of that falls true for you, you fall into the category of compulsion, which means it is not healthy for you. That's the distinction. And
Yeah.
99.9% of people fall into that compulsive piece.
Like, would you define, is there like a number of times a week, month that you would say is compulsive?
Yeah, and it's not even my definition.
Yeah.
I'm the messenger. So just to kind of be clear, when I say things there, or I will tell you this is my opinion, but scientific studies show even at very low frequency, even at one time a week, even at two times a month, when it comes to masturbation, again, it's usually isn't a habit at two times a week or two times a month, rather. It's a person fell into compulsion and now is backing out. So there's very many
Mhm.
variables, but even one time a week, that can keep your brain hooked on dopamine from a self sexual behavior. And the way I think about it is you're either moving towards your goals or away from them. So if you want to link your brain to yourself in sexual behaviors, then that might be a road to do so. But if you want a partner, if you want healthy intimacy, if you don't want to be dependent on high levels of dopamine, then that's not the road to take.
That makes perfect sense. And you've talked a lot about, and I'm sure you've learned a lot from your clients, but you've talked a lot about the impacts that porn and masturbation has on a relationship, and that could be detrimental to the sexual health and intimacy of a relationship. What do you think are, or what are some of the things that you've seen impact people
Yeah,
in their relationships?
absolutely. It is a number one driver of heated, not just breakups, heated breakups and divorce. Because most times those self sexual behaviors are actually secret self sexual behaviors. Your partner doesn't know about them. That's a whole nother component. So if you have secret sexual behaviors, now this creates a rift in the relationship. Also, when your brain gets linked to all that dopamine from a specific avatar of a person that you've been watching or consuming, it's literal consumption in pornography proper, OnlyFans, or even on social media, your brain gets linked to dopamine from that person, not your partner. It gets linked to those acts, those scenarios. So now your brain needs and wants that. It desires that. So sexual desire for your partner goes down, sexual satisfaction goes down, your viewpoint of your partner's body goes down, your own body self image is decreased, lack of self esteem. Like the mental and physical health ramifications are far and wide. The number one pain point is sexual arousal dysfunction, which I call SAD. ED is at the furthest end of that spectrum of sadness. So, sexual arousal dysfunction basically means your brain's been so desensitized, you have to go back to where you got the most dopamine, not your partner, to be able to be aroused. And so now it's time to be with your partner and you can't. And just think about the feedback loop that that's going to lead to. You can't be with your partner because you can't be aroused enough. So back into porn or wherever you are being aroused, and the cycle continues. I
That
know. I know. And again, remember, I am just
you're
the
the messenger.
messenger here. A 4-year old could tell you what I'm telling you here. I know it and I know it to be true, but think about what that's going to do to relationships. We already know. I have put videos out recently where I'm sure I'm already taking heat or I will soon, saying that porn and masturbation and OnlyFans and even hypersexualized social media will be what crushes masculine vitality. And we're already seeing it. Less men are
Already.
graduating from college than ever before. More women are. We see that more young men, and they're not even that young, mid 20s and 30s, are living with their parents longer because they are not able to get gainful, meaningful employment and they're falling into lower socioeconomic status. Those people are not finding partners. And I've already told you, ED is a major factor because they fear they can't be with that person intimately, which keeps them hooked to their screens. I honestly believe this is what's going to crush masculine vitality. And I don't want it. I want men to go, no way. I want to be a peak performer, man. I
Hmm.
want to be a one percenter more than ever before in history. You have to do differently than what everybody else is doing to be able to be healthy.
You know what's interesting, and you mentioned it briefly. I think you said hypersexualization of social media or something along those lines. I mean, I can't open up, and I don't really go on TikTok. I'll post and ghost. I know TikTok is like the devil, to quote some famous movies.
So bad.
Yeah, it's so bad. And that algorithm is just designed literally to hook you up and get you addicted to it. And
It is.
every time I go, I would say anytime I spend more than a few minutes on social media, Instagram is usually what I'm on, I do get, and sometimes it's even AI now, but like I do get like in my feed girls being, what you wouldn't be able to see on a regular website 10 years ago with how they're dressed and what they're doing and then innuendos they're making. And so you almost can't even avoid it if you're trying to without that. And what do you like? What can we do? Because once you're in an algorithm, you're in an algorithm, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes you have control over things and sometimes you don't. So, like, what do you recommend people do when you can't even open up Instagram without getting something hypersexualized fed to you?
Yeah, what I recommend is that you clean it up, thumbs down or you unfollow as many people as possible, and then you give it a washout period. And
Mm,
you're right, like sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But with my clients, that's exactly what I have them do. When they join my program, they go through, they clean it up, they add people who motivate them. Again, right? What's your goal? Find people who are ahead of the journey on what you actually want to create in your life and follow them. Clean up the feed, and when and if you choose to go back, because some people choose not to because they understand how it's such a slippery slope, but if you choose to go back, it's ready for you. And if you understand how these algorithms work, also, you can control them more. So,
hmm.
where you look, there's eye tracking software. So if something comes up, look away and don't engage with it. If you
God,
look for a minute or 30 seconds, the eye tracking is going to serve you more of the body part that you lingered on. And there's a funny story because my son Seamus, he's 18.
I
I
love
gave
that
each
name.
one of the kids, yeah, it's great, right? Uncle Seamus. We had an Uncle Seamus and we named him after him. It was my husband's uncle. But
I
I
love it.
gave each one of my kids a signed copy of my book. Like, and I wrote them a note in it. And Seamus is funny. He said that he would sell it on the black market, but it has stupid inscription in it or whatever. But he's just being. But anyways, I said I had a trailer made, a really cool trailer for the book. And I said, babe, go on and watch my trailer. And he's like, absolutely not. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because that's his persona being, funny. And he's like, if I watch that trailer, I will be served things that I don't want till the end of time. He's like, I have my feed perfectly curated. He really does. He's got it curated with motivational and fun. Like if he watched my trailer, so I said, touche, don't watch my trailer. I get it because that's what you need to do. You need to be so intentional in your feed, and especially with the demographic. If you are a man, your demographic alone that you signed up for will be fed it. And think about that, not to digress too much, but all the young women who are on TikTok or Instagram, but TikTok specifically, and we consider them to be quote unquote influencers, think about who they're influencing. That influence is making men consumers. And then we know from the scientific studies that are coming out on the platforms, that influence is also creating a generation of self objectified girls and young women. More of them are
Yes,
learning to become hypersexualized. Like we're just in for a world of hurt when we've got self-objectified women and we've got, it's actually narcissism. And again, not my opinion, that's from the scientific
100%. Yeah.
studies. Social media use in this way is creating more narcissism in men and self-objectification in women, consumer and consumed, all external validation. And guess what it leads to? Maladaptive identity formation. Nobody's forming their own identity of who they are and what they want to be from the inside. It's being formed from the likes and the hearts, the external validation. Like this is
Ugh.
deep stuff. This is comprehensive. This is complex. It's not just as shallow as watching a little video on social media. This is very controlled and manipulative.
Well, and then I think too, like if you, and you mentioned this earlier and I took it in a different direction, but I want to go back. When you talk about like OnlyFans as an example, or even if you follow an OnlyFans model on TikTok or Instagram or wherever, like, and you mentioned you kind of start to build almost like a relationship with people. Does that apply to
Yes,
like if
thank you.
if
Thank
I'm
you
following
because
a specific
I
person?
wanted to
Okay.
go there. Yeah. So here's the idea is that when people consume porn proper, we'll just call it, they get most times, they understand they're watching actors who are performing, that's being enhanced. But when it comes to OnlyFans, what the studies are showing is that it is making for parasocial relationships. Parasocial relationships are one sided, they're transactional, there's no real intimacy. So, there's a new study out that shows that 89.5 of the men on OnlyFans are married. 89.5% of men on OnlyFans, they're married men. They go on OnlyFans, they feel like they have this real relationship. Like it's conceptualized in their mind that it's like a girlfriend or someone who's adoring them, but it's only one sided. It's for money on the side of the performer. These are performers. It's performative for money. That's what the parasocial relationship is. And then there's another study that shows that 34% of women are concerned about the relationship that their partner has with an OnlyFans performer. This is highly disruptive.
That's
And
so
actually in that study, the performer said that the relationships are problematic between performers and men on OnlyFans. Parasocial relationships, transactional, one-sided, and again, it's terrible for humanity and actual relationships.
yeah, and it does. It's like it takes this level of, because even before, like if you think back to like you'd have to go to the video store, go into the porn section, get a VHS, like you at least had to work for it, I guess, is a little bit. But now the now the fact like you don't even have to like type in pornhub.com and search. You can literally just have this fake connection with an OnlyFans model who by the way, like I don't know how true this is, but I see more and more that like, oh, there's people making $100,000 a month with AI influencers on the on social, on OnlyFans, all of this stuff. And it's like, so now you're building this fake relationship with that isn't just transactional. It's like not real. And
It's not
it's
real.
creating, yeah. But the fact that people think it's real, and I kind of have a bit of a background because, like, being on reality TV, people think they know me and they don't. And so it's like I have that weird, like, wait, you don't actually know me. So, like, what do you think you
Right.
have get an opinion for,
And
kind of thing?
that kind of speaks to the more dysregulated your brain is, the more you would fall into the trap of that. The more regulated you are, you watch reality TV knowing there's very little reality there. Like a regulated brain knows that. The more dysregulated a brain is, the more it's influenceable. So that's where influencers become so dangerous or performers on OnlyFans, because they're actually dysregulated. We know this scientifically to a certain extent from the people that we've been able to see. Their brains or studies that have measured it. But at the same time, it's then appealing to a generation of more dysregulated people. So the way out of that is to regulate your brain, have self regulation, which allows you to have more discernment, which then allows you to understand that's not a real relationship. So you would never want it because it's fake intimacy. And when you understand that's fake and it's taking you away from what you really want, the choice to not do it becomes very easy. That's what peak performing men, it doesn't affect women as much, but that's what peak performers are doing. They know they're like, I don't want that fakeness. It's artificial, high levels of dopamine. It's just a hit. And if I get that hit, I can't have, what the delayed gratification in my real life would give me, which is a relationship that's rounded out and full. That instant gratification just gives you a hit of dopamine.
Which is
Reality
literally the
becomes
whole
blurred.
addiction. Yeah.
Reality becomes blurred because of the dopamine. Your brain just wants more of the dopamine. It's accustomed to getting it where it gets it.
Yeah.
Whether that be gambling, and in this case for most people, it's these parasocial relationships that are hypersexual.
And what's going on in the brain? I think I heard you talk about this. I listened to a bunch of your videos this morning. I know I told you so. I think there was one where you were talking about like literally it physically changes the brain and the way that it functions and the way that it looks in terms of size and functionality. Can you speak a little bit to what happens to the brain?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been multiple studies that show that not only does it change functionality or performance, that's what I mostly look at, and I've measured it myself, but it does change functioning. It changes the structure also. We know that the white and the gray matter become smaller. So basically, brains are underdeveloped in terms of structure and function. The underdevelopedness of function, which I find to be mind blowing actually, is that brains develop until the age of 28 on average. So most people are finding porn. And now in today's day and age, they're finding social media, these relationships, influencers, everything we've been discussing at younger and younger ages. Porn exposure is down to 8 on average now. And that's
Eight
because
years
everybody has a
old.
phone at 8 years old. So, and that doesn't mean necessarily a person started consuming it regularly, but what we know from another scientific study is the earlier the age of exposure, the more frequent and consistent a person consumes porn. That's why early age of
Addict.
exposure is very dangerous. And then it leads to 3 different reinforcement loops as I see it. And I've kind of put this together from multiple studies, but you're exposed to porn at an earlier age, which means you do go back to it earlier than if you weren't exposed to later. Then you go onto social media and we have this consumer consumed. We also know that that then shows up in DMs. Boys 14 years old send more than 70% send unsolicited genital pictures and they request nudes from girls at the age of 14. So this is a reinforcement loop. This is happening across the country, at least the country. And then the last reinforcement loop is then it shows up in the real world because these boys are sending these DMs. Now girls are interacting with them and we have these distorted relationships. That's 3 reinforcement loops. And back to my point is that all of them are decreasing function and structure in those brains that would have developed in such a healthy way up until the age of 28. When that first exposure happens and when these reinforcement loops become consistent, brain development is completely derailed. That's where the damage and the dysfunction and the destruction come from. Because now you have, 18 years of distorted miswiring happening instead of wiring and hardwiring into the healthy pattern. And it's all substantiated by scientific studies. And just to give you one more just easy way to think about it, what happens at that first exposure is the brain gets flooded with dopamine. That molecule I already talked about. When it gets flooded, it calibrates in the first exposure to need more dopamine the next time to get the same feeling, the same sensation. It's actually a protective mechanism, but it immediately leads to tolerance building. So when a person goes back pretty soon after that first exposure, they need more dopamine and it's off to the races in terms of tolerance and escalation. Those are the seeds of addiction. If you never water them, they don't grow. If you do water them, they do grow.
And then you have these young people who have misconceptualized relationships, but also like intimacy and sex. And then you have, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but then you're escalating because you're so young and you're chasing that first hit or, that first high as an addict is doing, right? And then you have these people that are having unrealistic sexual relationships where people could get hurt, people could it could become abusive. It's just total misalignment.
Yeah, it does often. It does. That's exactly what we're seeing scientifically. Back to the 50 Shades of Grey, I put it in my book that when those movies came out, sex toy injuries went through the roof. Nobody considers
Jeez.
that though. Like everyone's talking about their sex rooms and their toys and all that, except for there's a lot of people being injured because of it. So, and then we know too, there's scientific studies that show that choking is up, and up as something that men like and they're doing more often, choking their partner. And it goes back to what you said, like, how did that become part of a person's sexual arousal template? No porn that never becomes part of the arousal template because you're not seeing it over and over and over, giving your brain dopamine associated with choking. That's how that is now, kind of dripping into people's actual sex lives. Without porn, the arousal templates wouldn't become distorted like they are.
Because again, you're escalating, and it's probably not something that happens overnight when you're 14 or whatever, or 8, God forbid. It's funny because I think back to, I was just thinking while you were talking about the 8-year-old, my nephew's 9. I can't even imagine but I don't want to think about that. But I was thinking about like, what was the
No,
first
nobody does.
time? Yeah.
Nobody does. And, and just to frame it too, like I said, I have 5 kids. So really a silver lining of my work has been it's allowed me to talk with them pretty openly. Obviously, I talk about it all the time openly, but to really help them, forge healthy, intimate relationships. And honestly, it's changed my parenting. Now they're young adults. Like, they will bring their boyfriends and girlfriends and they'll stay at the house. Like, before all this, I wouldn't have done that. And then my youngest is 14. We continue to talk about things that are uncomfortable for me and her, but it allows us to do it, and that's the way
Yeah.
you help communication. I always joke the most terrifying thing, you think I've talked about some challenging things, communicate with your people, talk to them about this stuff, that's the
Yeah.
most terrifying.
That's, I mean,
Yeah. And
I
if,
can't
if I
even,
can, if I can just tell you one more thing, I just had a
please.
recent conversation with I think he was like 19 or 20, a young man who he didn't even know he was saying this until I gently showed it to him. He was talking about how, he had a porn habit since he was 10, that's what I talk to people. And then he said he went to be with his partner for the first time and he couldn't get aroused. But this is what he said is because it was so vanilla. And I'm like, wait a second here, back up, because some gorgeous woman wants to be with you but you think it's vanilla. She actually wants to be with you. I'm like, but
Like,
it's
yeah.
too quote unquote vanilla for you because you've conditioned your brain for a decade. Like the thought of that was too vanilla would never cross the non porn exposed brain. And that's exactly what I'm talking about with the reinforcement loops. And then it
Gosh,
leads to ED in 20-year-olds.
I was going to say the amount of people. So I'm 40. I just turned 40 a couple months ago. But the amount of
Nice.
people over the last 10, maybe even 15 years that are like my age or a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older, using ED medication, whether that's what's the one, Tad, whatever they are,
Viagra,
Viagra, and the
Cialis.
other. Yeah, Cialis. That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah, yeah. The amount of people that have been using that already is like, I remember I'd be like, what? Like, do you have a problem already? Like, you're in your peak. You should.
Mhm.
And do you think this contributes to like the lower testosterone that
I was
men
just
have
gonna
now?
say
Okay.
that literally that's why because so many men take ED meds and testosterone replacement. TRT is on almost every intake of people I work with. And I pose the question, why do you think you need testosterone replacement? Like that early on in my career with all this, I'm like, all the men that are on testosterone that shouldn't have a testosterone problem. So without looking at porn and hypersexual consumption, like without looking at it, you're not looking at the whole picture. And I have
That's what I
personally
was
seen
at.
it. I have personally seen it. First of all, we know that ED in young men has more than doubled in the last decade. It's going to continue the trajectory. And, someone recently joked with me that you can't watch anything without getting ED pill ads.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like
Oh, yeah.
they're everywhere because the industries aren't stupid. The pharmaceutical industry, the tech industry, they all know where this is leading. But you need a certain level of arousal in your brain. So I can see if a person's brain has that desensitization and the lack of arousal. Many of the people I work with, the pills don't even work. And if that is happening to a
Jesus.
person, there's significant desensitization. But no brain, should have that level of desensitization ever, actually, like never mind
Right.
when you're young. Same thing with testosterone. This is a very common point of contention for people. They get mad at me and I usually get emails, and I just sent out, so just so you know, I have a blog post linking these scientific articles that show if you are frequently having frequent orgasms or ejaculation, it depletes your testosterone.
Yeah.
We know it. So like connect the dots, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's behaviorally induced.
Yeah. Well, and if you think, so I recently, so one of the reasons this kind of this came up right now is I recently learned that maybe 6 months ago, I was listening to some podcast and they were talking about how ejaculation in a male like depletes, I want to say it's 60 something percent. I don't know how much, but a like significant amount of
It
testosterone
is.
depletion. Yeah. And it makes sense, right? Because, a man and your primal instinct is to mate. And then once you spread your seed for like, I don't know if I'm using
Yeah,
the right terms. You spread your
evolutionarily,
seed.
right.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens. And then you rebuild it up and you do
Mhm.
it again. It's like evolution. It's, our primal instinct. So it made total sense to me, but it was alarming to think about.
And it goes back to what we said earlier, like, if that's not compulsive, where it's not happening too frequently, then that's how our bodies, men's bodies are supposed to work. But when this compulsion comes in, the more that you're depleting the system, the more that depletion sticks around. And that's when you end up with problems. And at the same time, testosterone is actually first produced in the brain, not the genitals. Many people don't understand. There's an axis in the brain that first produces testosterone, sends the signals down to the genitals, which also contributes to production. But when there's brain dysregulation, that production in the first place doesn't happen. The neurotransmitters, the way they cascade changes. Again, there's depletion or there's too much, and it creates neurorigidity, which then affects hormones. It's
That's
pretty logical when you just think about it logically. That's why I say to people all the
exactly.
time, it's logical. If you just think about the logical aspect, like, you can connect the dots yourself. And if porn and
Yeah.
masturbation isn't in the mix, then there might be some biological or physiological issue at the level of the body. But for the vast majority of people, it's brain dysregulation.
And you are the only person I've ever heard talk about this. And when I think about, I mean, I have supplements sitting on my dresser that I take every day to support natural testosterone production, right? I'm getting a little
Mhm.
older. I recognize that. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is not something that I would have ever thought of if it wasn't something that you just shared here. But when you look at the crisis, what do people position? And like you said, it's the pharmaceuticals, it's the companies that are, the hims, the hers, the Romans, like these companies that are popping up all over the place that are just handing this stuff out like it's candy. And no one's, again, we're that nation that just wants to pop a pill and call it a day. But like there's so much that's going on otherwise that an ED medication isn't going to cure. All my supplements aren't going to cure if you're not, optimizing your brain function.
No, and if you saw the amount of supplements that I have here, it would be astonishing. We have a ton of supplements, but supplements help to supplement, what's low in your system, and they're not the end all and the be all. And I actually did a consultation with a gentleman earlier today. He could not understand what my work was because it wasn't a pill. I'm like, you don't want a pill, my
Yep.
friend. I'm like, you don't want a pill because then you're dependent on a pill. I'm like, and the pill's probably not even going to work for you. What I do is holistic. It's all natural. It's like a workout for your brain. It makes your brain stronger. He's like, but is it a medication? I'm like, no, it's not a medication, but that's just, what people think they need. But then once people realize, okay, I've accidentally been, making for this situation, I can back it out. And that's the beauty of neuroplasticity. People's brains really do get into what I call a neurorigid pattern. It gets locked in this need for dopamine and it has difficulty coming out of it by itself, but it can be backed out. And this is the part I think is most mind blowing. So I already told you, like, if a brain is not developing well, starting at the age of 10, we'll just say, most people out there now have never experienced their brain in the way it was supposed to be at its maximum functionality. They've been running at 50%, if that. So most of my
Jeez.
clients, they're like, I had no clue how much better I could feel and perform overall because they've been
Yeah.
running at half mast.
Well, I think this is I want to make sure we cover like your specific, work that you do with porn addiction and masturbation addiction, all that stuff. But I also wanted to talk a little bit. I'm going to this episode's going to come out next week. I have an episode coming out tomorrow, which is just me talking about my burnout experience, which people have already listened to if you're listening to this likely. But that's one of the things that I kind of was starting to feel like over the last few months is that like everything felt like the biggest decision of my life. Like, what am I going to eat for dinner? I don't know. Instead, I'm going to have a mental breakdown. And so little things like that. And I noticed that I wasn't able to think long term. And like people would be, invite, hey, are you available to do something this weekend or travel here? And I'm like, I can't even make that decision right now. I don't know because I was so overstimulated. And then when I found myself doing was doom scrolling at night, doing the dual screen thing, which you're not supposed to do. TV's on and I'm also doom scrolling, right? So, maybe what is going on if people are operating at 50%? Obviously, you've got some of this porn addiction and all the readily available sexual content that's everywhere. And that plays a huge part and a much bigger part for some people. But what is going on with people's brains with all these screens, all these apps, all these notifications? And more people seem to be experiencing some form of burnout.
Oh yeah.
And I just wanted to get your take on what the heck is going on.
Absolutely. Well, there's full book dedicated. There's many books, but there's a relatively new book called The Anxious Generation
I
that
saw that.
came out talking about, increase in anxiety, increase in ADHD symptoms or diagnoses for a whole generation. And basically, what I know from an EEG and electroencephalogram perspective, seeing people's brains, is that all the screen time, what it does is it creates a wired and tired pattern. Your brain is operating in the excessively fast and excessively slow modes simultaneously. And healthy baseline arousal is in the middle at a level 5, is the easiest way to think about it. When you're stuck in, I call it the pendulum effect or strained brain. When you're stuck in it, you're operating at 9 plus 2. You're down in the slow, which is a 2. You're up in the super fast, which is a 9. When you add them together, you get into the 6 or 7. So you kind of feel regulated to a certain extent, but it's all from excessive acceleration or gassing in the brain and also braking. So then it leads to burnout. If you drove your car around town at 75 miles per hour with your pedal to the metal on the brake, what would happen to your engine and your transmission? You would fry your car. That's what people are doing. That's what leads to burnout. But it goes back to the dopamine. Every notification is known, lots of studies, to give you a hit of dopamine. It's like somebody wants me, somebody needs me, I'm externally validated. Even emails, you can feel yourself be pulled towards,
Package deliveries, I've heard. Like
yeah,
the Amazon
Amazon.
packages. Yeah.
I call them all easy button behaviors. You're getting things delivered, your food gets delivered, you don't work for anything anymore. And we have a generation of people who are caught in doom scrolling because, going back to what you were talking about, all of those skills that you're talking about, they come from your frontal lobe. They're called executive function skills: planning, organization, working memory, impulse control, judgment, socialization. It's all in the frontal lobe. When we were talking before about the studies that show the decrease in structure and function, it's in the frontal lobe. So we know the frontal lobe doesn't work as well anymore. Now you're not able to do those things. And your brain just craves the dopamine to feel better from the wired and tired pattern it created. That's the cycle or the loop. It creates it, then it perpetuates it. It's literally a downward spiral, which, in terms of neurological function, it's a negative feedback loop. And I consider my work is to help identify why a person's stuck in a negative feedback loop and then upward spiral them. And that's how you get out of it. You figure out what your brain needs to perform better. You train your brain in the right direction, which enables you to then concentrate longer, do the studying or the work that you need to do, go out with your friends, which felt too exhaustive, a month ago, connect with your partner, start upward spiraling that brain.
Yeah. And I want to talk about a little bit more of your tactics for doing that with your programs and your coaching and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
a couple months ago, I with my therapist, and she's a mental health counselor, not a neuroscientist or anything, obviously, but um, she had me track my activity for like 2 days. And if it was more than 15 minutes, she wanted me to jot it down, but also be cognizant of like things that I thought I was doing that I wasn't really doing. So like, for example, I work in software marketing. I'm a marketing executive. I lead 5 people. My days are crazy. I could be glued to the computer all day, every day if I don't make time. And so what I noticed is I take walks. I take like a 15, 20-minute walk a couple times a day with my dog. But then as I started noticing, I'm not actually taking this walk. I'm answering an email, or I'm responding to a
Mm-hmm.
chat, or I'm taking a call. And so I'm not actually taking a break. I'm just doing something while moving. Like it's
Yes.
totally different.
Yeah.
Or like I would
And
edit podcast clips.
of course, some movement's good, but your brain needs a break also.
Yeah.
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 I know,
And
I'll
so
find
I
that, like, I'll go to work out and there'll be notifications, but I won't actually, I have no notifications on my anything actually, except
was
for
going to
when I'm
ask you that.
working, my team can get through. But then I'll be like, "Why did I turn that off?" Because I don't even like them coming through while I'm using the app that I use to work out. You have to be really aware of that because a lot of people say, "Oh, I went for a 30-minute walk." But even if you worked all day and you produced, then you take a 30-minute walk and you listen to a podcast, your brain's still on. Like, on
That's
is
exactly, yeah.
production and taking things in. Output, input, that's still on. What people need is brain neutral time. You take a walk, and if you're not used to it, you'll feel squirrely. You'll feel like, what is happening right now? But as you practice that, you get used to being present in the present moment. Your brain starts to go slower, more towards that five, that neutral, healthy baseline arousal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that. Track what you are doing and make
Oh, it was
sure.
alarming.
It's alarming because people convince themselves they're doing better than they are, I think, like, and we are in front of screens. Screens are our greatest advantage, honestly, if we learn how to use them well, but you really have to use them intentionally. That goes back to the intention
Yeah.
piece, like top one percenters, they're intentional. They won't get caught in a doom scroll, that because
Yeah.
they understand not only is it a waste of their time, it's harming them. And that would never be a thing because they want to get up and be able to not only contribute to the world, but be able to enjoy it. Not just pleasure's quick hits. The happiness trifecta is what you get from healthy dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, connection and joy along with it. So, that's the sweet spot. That's what I want for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And I think it's what's so interesting is when people think, and I'm guilty, like I thought I was being intentional. I thought I was smart taking my walks and getting my workouts in and stuff. And then I'm like, oh yeah, like I just walked here. I walked 45 minutes to, my therapy appointment. And then she's like, well, what were you listening to? I'm listening to a news podcast. Well, if there's something we know about the news, that's just going to rile somebody up about something, right? So it's
Absolutely.
like, I just never thought of that before. I thought, listening to something is getting my brain off of work and getting me to think about different things. And there's value in that. But at the same time, like, I'm just, stimulating myself with a different topic. It's
Yeah, a
just,
lot of the
I don't think
people
people
that I
realize
work
that.
with, news is a real big issue. Back in the day, news delivered the information. Now it's all inflammatory. And I try to help people see that. Like, and again, it goes back to the why. Like, we accidentally, in that case, you stress yourself out because the stress of it actually feels a little exhilarating, but it goes back to the wired and tired brain pattern. That brain pattern will want you to soothe it and stimulate it at the same time if you can. So you're enjoying what you're listening to, but it's also spiking your stress levels a little. That's the exhilaration or the stimulation. That's the opposite of what we want during that brain neutral time. And actually, there's a
Yeah.
really cool study that shows even 3 minutes at a time will help create a brain reset if you empty out the brain and you don't do anything. Intentional breathing. The reason the intentional breathing, which obviously it has its own health benefits, but if you're focused on your breath in, out, you can't have any thoughts. That's the beauty of that.
And it's the irony of you saying that is I was listening again to your content earlier today, and I was outside for lunch on my rooftop, and I actually took my headphones out as I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm not going to look at my phone, but guess what? I'm listening. I'm sitting there, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take that 3 minutes, and I just sat there, and I took a couple deep breaths, and I waited. It ended up being like 4 minutes, and it was very. People need the reminders. I just don't think people know. It was very
They don't,
relaxing.
they don't know. And you forget. It's so simple too, right? And
Yeah.
I will tell you, I'm a super pragmatic person, especially in today's day and age. You need to use your Google Calendar for that. Don't count on yourself to take the 3-minute breaks. In your Google Calendar, set your schedule very intentionally. When the break comes up in your calendar, make yourself take it. You're going to want to push through and do something, get the next thing done because we're behind in our own lives. I don't know how that
Always.
happens, but we are. And so this way you take it because it's scheduled. So I always say if it's not scheduled, it's not real. When you put into your
Mm.
schedule, also your nervous system can relax around it because that is the thing you're supposed to be doing. So you don't have to be stressed about doing something else and then you actually do it.
Yeah. I actually gave that advice to someone on my team earlier today. I'm like, structure, put your breaks in your calendar, put your time that you need to work on specific tasks in your calendar because it helps. I do it. It's like I know during these hours I need to do this. And sure, sometimes I'll change it, but I'm gonna be much more intentional myself on focusing on it.
Yeah. And
So
meals, if you
yeah.
eat at your desk, plan meals and eat away from your desk, not doing anything. Don't be on a screen. Don't be squeezing something in. Even if you get accustomed to that, that will help too. Big time, big time.
What do you so we've shared some of them kind of organically, and I want to be respectful of your time, but what are some of the strategies, especially when it comes to notifications, when it comes to social media? Like when I made the decision a couple of years ago to shut Instagram notifications off, which is where I have most of my followers and most of my, content. I'm very like I'm not an influencer. I have a nice following, and I'm just like I'm going to just kind of be myself because this is too exhausting to try and be something for other people. And so I've gotten like very good at well, I've been very good at doom scrolling lately, but I'm going to get better at that. But I've got very good at being intentional with my social media. It happens on my terms, not on the notifications terms, the algorithms terms,
But
et
but
cetera,
think
et cetera.
about that. That is, I love what you just said because that indicates that you've really tapped into your identity. You're like, this is who I am. I don't need
Hmm.
to do the things that all the people. And that's where I fall into. And it can be such a battle when you're trying to help the world through your message,
Seriously.
figuring out what you want to show up as, but what you also need to protect yourself, everybody. Like, what do you want to be in the world? How do you want to contribute? What do you want to enjoy? Make sure you're doing those things. Then make sure you stay true to your identity. When it comes to notifications, I would say don't have any of them except for the ones that you absolutely need to. So for years, I actually got rid of it because it was owning me. I couldn't get the notifications to turn off. I had an iWatch. I do keep my texts on because I have 5 kids. So
Yeah.
everybody knows the double phone call gets me to pick it up immediately. And there has been emergent situations. But for a while, I had it on the watch and all my kids would just be texting me nothing. And it'd be like, bing, 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 bing. It was a stressor for me because anytime I get a notification, it's a thing I have to deal with,
Well,
So
totally.
I took the watch off. I don't have any notifications. None. And I would
Wow.
encourage everybody to do that. You don't need to be notified about anything unless if you have kids or if you have people on your team, the notifications are on during those times. All the rest of the time, they're off. And you figure out what for any given person, it's going to be different, the thing that they need to work on. You figure out what is that thing that you're doing too much of, or it's infiltrating your life. Whatever that thing is, you put a boundary. You learn to set, which is pretty easy to set a healthy boundary, but you learn to hold that healthy boundary. So, for me, I would never text anybody who works for me. I wouldn't communicate with them over the weekend at all. They know that. You get a message from me, we're at a DEF CON situation because I would never do it. And I don't want you to do it to me unless it's a DEF CON situation. And
And
everybody
if something
understands that boundary. Protects you.
something yeah, exactly. And also I always say about boundaries, they're a suggestion if you don't enforce them. Oh.
Well, that's the holding.
But
That's the holding, right? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
it
And I
really
think
is. And even with my kids, a lot of people have kids and they feel like they have to, be there for them all the time. And I was totally guilty of that. My daughter, who's now 20, they had a contest like 2 years ago. So she's 18 years old. Her and all of her friends, which mom would respond first? It was me. And I'm like, oh my, I was at a party when it happened too with my friends. And I was so proud of myself until I realized like that's not cool. That's an absolute codependent behavior because you know what I mean? Like so since then,
you're
and
like
there's
at
been
her
a
beck
lot.
and call.
Totally. I'm at the beck and call. So since then, it's really interesting because with her in particular, she and I love her, of course, but she communicates a lot, just any thought she has. I'll only call her back at the end in the evening. I don't answer
Mm.
any of them. I give her the opportunity to work through it emotionally, but that's part of my growth. And, that's what people can figure out. Okay, if you're answering somebody else's text 10 times a day, I have clients of mine that they do that with their employer. They're the one who talks their employer off the ledge 17 times a day. That's not your role, like you check your texts every hour or you check your email every 3 hours.
Yeah.
Nothing, nothing's gonna blow up if you set a schedule for yourself. So you're not getting pinged all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to. And again, I'm pinged all the time. I go on do not disturb when I need to focus on something, or I close it down. And I have boundaries where after 6 p.m., I don't get any notifications from work. And if I have to do something later, which happens sometimes, I try to schedule send it, because I know how I feel when I get that ding on a Friday night or on a
Hmm.
weekend or on a
Hmm.
Tuesday night or whenever that is. And it
Hmm.
just creates an instant, like, anxious response. And it doesn't even have to be anything urgent, but it just does. And it's so bad for us.
Yeah.
I never
It is
feel
so
good
funny
about it.
because somebody I know told me that he purposely sends the schedule send for 3 a.m. just to do that to people. I'm like, we need to talk,
It's
friend, because
so
that's
mean.
a lot of dysregulation. Because I'm like, I would never do that. To exactly being respectful of others, and then also like understanding that I don't want that. I won't check my email after 6, because if something happens, then I'm stressed out about it all night long. Then I don't sleep properly. Like I'm like, it'll be there in the morning unless somebody makes me
Well,
very
calls
aware of it.
you. Exactly.
Mhm.
No, I think
Mhm.
that's outstanding. I feel like more and more, like, people who are managing people or leading people should think like that, because,
Mhm.
it's too much for all of us, especially now. I think that we're all online so much, especially if you have any kind of, office type of job, and it just becomes too much, and it's the overstimulation. And I think that's what I was feeling until I went on,
I
I
think
took a little
I
break
think that's
last
a
week.
number one problem for most people is that all the boundaries of when work happens and when it doesn't are
They're
completely blurred
gone.
now.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, being a top 1% person, you have the strength to say, like, for me to be to work here, this is what I'm going to need. And then if that employer doesn't fall into what you need, then, it doesn't mean you quit on the spot, but it means you align yourself with the lifestyle that you know serves you. That's a top 1% thing. Most people just endure, the
I
tolerances of
know.
whatever's happening to them.
And it creates
But
just
you
a
only get
toxic
to you only get to
environment.
go around once as far as we know it, right? So like we might as well go out of our way to create the life that we want. Most people lose sight. They're actually creating their lifestyle. So if you don't like it, you do have control in changing it.
Right. That's so well said. That's so well said. You have been awesome to talk to today.
Thank you.
I I have loved this. I feel like it flew by. I could talk to you for another hour,
No, that's how
but
it works.
I what in a nutshell, you've shared so much practical tips. What if someone wants to work with you, what could they work with
Mhm.
you with, and what kind
Mhm.
of offerings do you have, and any other
Sure.
practical advice that you'd want to share?
Yeah, of course. So, of course, my book is out. It's the easiest, most accessible, and affordable way to get rolling with all of the strategies that I talk about. And in the book, I talk about the neuroscience and the advanced technology. So you can understand the brain pattern and then understand what to do about it. And then, of course, if you're inspired, that's the services that I offer. They're very advanced tech where I can visualize and show you with your own eyes how your brain is performing in the areas and levels of dysfunction. And then once we see that, then I have my own app, Dr. Trish Leigh. In that app, I can use protocols that I basically have established when it comes to porn addiction and compulsive masturbation. Most people don't know about it at all.
Mm.
And so, in this way, I can help teach your brain to perform better so you don't need dopamine from those behaviors. And it's all at drtrishleigh.com. Everything's outlined there. There's a link to my YouTube channel. On my YouTube channel, there's 2,000 videos trying to help people with recovery from home. So again, another really great resource.
And they're
I have a
awesome and
program for
short. Yeah, they're
yeah,
like
I've
shorter
tried
too.
to
Yep.
I have a program for partners, which I'm just committed to doubling down on because it's been on the back burner. It's called Sanity After Betrayal. My goal there is to teach women that if your man is caught up in all of these behaviors, it is a compulsion, not a choice. And I'm trying to get people back on the same page of, both growing emotionally so that they can help each other. Doesn't mean you have to stay together, but you also don't have to bounce and recreate a lot of those issues. That's at Sanity After Betrayal. And yeah, that's about it.
Those are great. And I feel like you're obviously pioneering on this, and that's not easy work, which is how you end up in a lot of debates. Like you were on the Jubilee podcast a few weeks back, where you were literally, and I highly recommend people go listen to that. It's a little bit of a different style than this show, but Dr. Trish basically had a conversation with people in the porn industry or in OnlyFans, industry, and I guess they're kind of the same, but it was really compelling and interesting to hear both sides. So I encourage everyone to check that out. Before we head out, is there anything you want to ask me? I like to give my guests a chance to ask anything.
Yeah. I like going back to, I guess, your story arc in terms of reality TV. And then I did want to know how you named the podcast, the name, because I was thinking about, which I can tell you my thought on it after you answer
I'd
that, I
love to
guess.
hear it. Yeah, so my arc is, I feel like actually we're a little bit kindred souls in a way of, I feel like when I go through something or something happens to me, I have to help other people. And so, that a lot of my arc is, how do I turn what's happened to me or my experience into digestible information for somebody else? So maybe they can avoid it, or maybe they can, learn from my learnings or my strategies, which is the whole point of my burnout episode, where it's like, hey, here's how I've been feeling. I'm sure you've been feeling that way. Here's some of the things that have been helping me feel better. So that's kind of like what I like to do. I like to take my experiences and turn them into something that is accessible for others, and maybe it'll help somebody. For the
I love that.
podcast, yeah, it used to be called Conversations with Nick Thompson, but the ethos hasn't changed. I feel like people go through life with their eyes wide shut, and you just kind of like meander, and I've been there, right? So it's like you meander along and life's happening to you and you're not an active participant. And I feel like when I started kind of opening my eyes to all sorts of things in culture and, conversations like this, mental health, the medical community, all of these things that are so interesting to me that I feel like we don't get an opportunity to talk about, that we should have a conversation that helps people open their eyes. So whether it's, a dating and relationship coach or therapist or neuroscientist or politicians sometimes, like, how can we have real conversations that help people become more aware so they can be show up in the world with their eyes wide open?
Yeah, I love it. That's really cool. Yeah, because
Thank you.
I was thinking, like, from a mind standpoint, like, the eyes are the window to our soul, but also the perspective that we have using our eyes is a reflection of how we think, plus it's the world we see going in. Like, it's a two-way street. So that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking, is that, eyes wide open really reflects with an open mind. And like with my book, it's all about elevating your mind over, what you're experiencing right now, and recognizing there's another way by that kind of awakening or opening up. So I really like the name. I thought that was cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's so cool. And I think that's what's most important, is a lot of people just don't know stuff. And, you're given the gift of your knowledge out in a lot of free
Yeah, and having
content.
the courage, you too, having the courage to just talk about this stuff, and it's super important. So hopefully, people are inspired to balance their screen time, and especially adios any explicit content, and really think about the way you're engaging with other people on social media, because it'll pay off in ways you can't even imagine.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Well, I want to say thank you again. You said kind of
Yeah, of course.
where people can find you and get your book, and all of those links are going to be in the show notes. So I'm going to eliminate the extra clicks, and people can just have the one click, which is probably a little bit anti what we've been talking about, but
No.
we'll make it
Well, it
as
does
easy
make
as
it easier for
possible.
people, right? Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
it
So,
does make it easier.
yeah.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
thanks again for coming on here. Any
Yeah, of
parting
course. My
words?
pleasure. Yeah, it was really fun. Same thing.
Thank you.
We could we could be here all night probably, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. Well, I
Yeah.
want to thank you again. This has been great. Your work and your
Cool. Thank you.
knowledge and sharing has been greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.